For those who aren't aware, we have a growing number of listeners at Lorraine Correctional in Grafton.
Excellent.
Yeah, in fact, there was a group of 30 guys that pointed and laughed while I had my beard shaved a while back. And guys, I'm pleased to report that I no longer have a baloney face. Thank you. And I got to tell you, Lauren and I had a chance to go visit there. I've been back since. And before I had a chance to visit what Pastor Scott's doing at Lorraine Correctional, to be honest, I was relatively indifferent about incarceration. I mean, it's not that I was ignoring it. I didn't think about it very often.
Right.
And I had very surface level opinions because I hadn't ever kind of experienced anything like that.
Yeah, no personal connection.
Correct. I don't have anyone in my immediate family or, circle of friends who are incarcerated at the moment. But going in to meet those guys, it was, I don't know if transformative is too big of a word, but it really opened my eyes. And because there's some wonderful dudes who love Jesus in there. So it's made me think a lot more about incarceration and criminal justice.
Yeah. When our whole worldview of the incarcerated community is based on TV and movies, all you think about is, watch your back. Somebody's going to shank you.
Right. Right. But no, we've got guys at Lorraine Correctional who are, I mean, it's not the entire population, but there's a group of guys who are trying to make a huge difference for the kingdom inside the walls.
Excellent.
And there's no question the scripture talks about the fact that we ought to not just care about people who are in prison, but visit them. And so I can't help but bring up an article I saw in the Washington Post about one particular inmate out of Missouri. Because, as it says here, the state of Missouri executed Brian Dorsey just shortly after 6 p.m. local time on Tuesday this week. And executions are much less common now based on a number of factors. He was convicted in December of 2006 in a double murder of his cousin and her husband. Hours earlier, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to stop the execution. No dissents were noted in the court's decision to reject two bids filed Sunday by the death row inmate Dorsey, who was 52, and had been placed, and he was been held in Potosi Correctional Center in Washington County, Missouri. They also tried Missouri Governor Mike Parson. He denied a separate plea for clemency this week. And so Dorsey's legal team and his supporters had argued in the clemency petition that it would be wrong to execute Dorsey because he's been, as they said, rehabilitated. They said, don't do this. I mean, they didn't say let him out. They just said, don't kill him.
Okay.
And so you might think, oh, okay, well, yeah, of course his lawyers would say that. He's fine now. Don't execute him. Now, according to this article, he had unprecedented written support from dozens of prison staff members, including a former warden. Very specifically, he was called a model inmate, one who lived in the honor dorm and works as a prison barber. He gave haircuts to prison guards. Talk about trust. Okay. Retired Warden Troy Steele, who headed the Potosi Correctional Center where he was held, wrote of Dorsey that, quote, his behavior is reported as exceptional, having received no reports of any type of misconduct. He wrote that Dorsey had achieved, quote, the highest level of respect and confidence from staffers in the prison. A group of more than 70 corrections officers or corrections staff members at the prison wrote a letter to Parson, the governor, in which they said that they are usually in favor of the death penalty, but are, quote, in agreement that the death penalty is not the appropriate punishment for Brian Dorsey, according to a court filing. They know he was convicted of murder, but that's not the Brian, quote, they know. A former warden at that prison and 70 employees who get haircuts from him said, don't kill him, please. Governor was like, nah, we'll let it happen. I don't think it was that callous. The governor, that's not fair to me. The governor allowed it to take place. He didn't he didn't offer clemency. And the Supreme Court of the United States unanimously just didn't do anything. And so he was put to death.
Now, I'm wondering, the Supreme Court, they actually had to hear this plea. and chose to do nothing, right? It's not like it sat on their desk and they didn't get to it in time.
Yeah, correct.
They actively chose not to do anything.
That is correct. Yeah. And in these cases, I think they get, I don't know all the legal terminology, but it gets pressed in front of them and they have to make a decision because they've stopped executions in the past. But we have to remember that in terms of the Supreme Court, they can't just go, he seems nice, never mind, don't kill him. They're bound to interpret the law.
Yeah.
And so they're bound to take facts of the case and determine whether or not he was justly punished and justly sentenced. They don't get to have their feelings as part of it.
True.
A governor is a different story. You know how that goes. When governors and presidents leave office, a few hours before they are done, they're just signing pardons. Woo! Let them out.
Yeah. You contributed my campaign, you're out.
Right. I mean, for any reason whatsoever. But of course, the question has to be, Brian, don't be a big softy. What did he do? We'll talk about the crime a little bit more in a few minutes and see how we feel about this idea. When you have a former warden and 70 employees of the prisons that don't execute this man, just keep him here. We love him. He's changed. Why would they do that? I can't resist talking about cases in the criminal justice system that make national headlines, because as Christians, we're supposed to care for those in prison, and because my experience visiting twice now at Lorraine Correctional, seeing some guys who love Jesus, trying to make a difference for the kingdom in there, I can't resist talking about these things as the Lord has softened my heart in this area. So the guy's name is Brian Dorsey. He's been incarcerated for 17 years, and he was just executed last week, or a couple days ago, in the state of Missouri, after his lawyers filed an appeal at the U.S. Supreme Court, who declined to do anything about it. The Missouri governor declined to offer clemency. And in spite of all that, a former warden of the prison and 70 employees of the prison said, please don't kill him. He's rehabilitated. Somebody asked by text, they said, almost 20 years later, they gave the death penalty. Why wait that long? Well, it's actually probably not that long. It can take longer than that.
Oh, yeah. You got to think, you got your case that runs for any length of time to actually get to the point where the person is convicted and sent to prison. But then there's all the appeals that go on, and occasionally you find new evidence that comes up.
That's right.
Or sometimes you find prosecutorial misconduct where they were trying to rack up their numbers so they didn't tell the defense about something.
Yeah, it's such a long process because they don't want to kill an innocent person on accident.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's right. It's supposed to be long. And by the way, it's way more expensive than life in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Way more expensive. We talked about that before. If you don't believe me, go look it up. It's all over the internet.
It's on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. We have a YouTube. We had a whole conversation about it. So, but the big question becomes, wait, before y'all get soft there, Brian, what did he do? Let's talk about it. 2 days before Christmas in 2006, Brian Dorsey's cousin, Sarah Bonney, and her husband, Ben Bonney, took in Dorsey because a pair of drug dealers were threatening him to collect on a drug debt. And Dorsey was in a, quote, psychotic state from not sleeping for 72 hours while on a crack cocaine bender, according to his attorneys. So he's on a cocaine bender, not slept for 72 hours, and that night, prosecutors said, Dorsey shot the couple while they were in bed, and they left behind a 4-year-old daughter. Wow. It's terrible. Prosecutors said Dorsey took a cell phone, jewelry, 2 firearms, and a copy of Bambi 2 belonging to the daughter of the victims, and he took the items to repay a drug debt. Now, Daria made a good point yesterday in our meeting about that stack of things he was trying to repay a drug debt with. I mean, he clearly was not thinking.
Yeah,
real
that
straight.
might have been Lauren. But yeah, that you're not going to get much money for any of those things. So clearly he wasn't in his right mind.
I mean, Bambi 2? I mean, of all the movies you're going to grab, well, that's worth a lot. No, I don't think anyone's seen it.
Yeah, the firearms, if he was intending to sell them or use them as collateral, he probably got, fairly decent money for them. But jewelry. Who knows what the quality of the jewelry was?
But now, and it doesn't seem that prosecutors are disputing the fact that he was on a drug bender and hadn't slept for 72 hours. Okay? I'm not saying it's a good excuse, but I'm saying it does paint a different picture, does it not? I mean, I don't know. And when he learned the police were looking for him, he turned himself in and cooperated, his attorney said. So, so he was executed. I don't know. Are you? Any thoughts on that crime?
It's horrific. And regardless of whether he was in his right mind or not, he needed punished in some way.
Yeah, there's consequences for double murder.
Yeah, obviously.
There ought to be.
And leaving
Romans 13.
leaving a child an orphan. However, I do think being followers of Jesus, it demands of us, even if it's a criminal, the loss of life should make us sad.
Mm-hmm.
Which life?
Any life. Like him being executed, even if he was a hardened criminal, that should make us sad because we're all sinners as well, and that's a person.
Now, Dorsey's current attorneys argued that their client received ineffective counsel at his trial. And the reason for that, and this was sent up all the way up to the Supreme Court as part of this, his current attorneys said that the previous attorneys conducted no investigation. They obtained nothing from Mr. Dorsey in exchange for his guilty plea. Like they just convinced him to plead guilty and they didn't get anything in exchange for that.
And normally they offer a bit of leniency if you're going to plead guilty.
Right.
The original attorneys did not disclose that Dorsey was in a drug-induced psychosis. The current attorneys argued that the part of the reason was financial. Why? Because in Missouri, trial attorneys receive a flat fee of $12,000, regardless of whether it's a death penalty case, which takes a lot more time and work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been multiple organizations, including the American Bar Association in Missouri and some other organizations that have said, yeah, it's a problem that we only offer the flat fee for death penalty cases. How can you really get justice enacted when sometimes attorneys are compelled to defend someone because we all have that right, and they only get $12,000?
Yeah. So they want it done as soon as they can be done so they get back to making more money.
3 years before the crime, the American Bar Association wrote that, quote, counsel in death penalty cases should be fully compensated at a rate that is commensurate with the provision of high-quality legal representation and reflects the extraordinary responsibilities inherent in a death penalty representation.
Mm-hmm.
But his attorneys only got $12,000. But that wasn't a big enough argument, apparently, for the governor or for anybody else. Nor was the word of 70 correction staff or a former warden.
Well, he didn't deny committing the murders.
No, in fact, he made a final statement before he was executed.
Yeah, bad representation or not, he admitted the guilt. So he, in the judge's mind, that was, you're guilty. Here's the sentence. Well,
yeah, and on top of that, it matters whether he's sorry, I guess, right? Doesn't society care about that?
No.
Like, you don't think society cares?
Not in a court case. I don't think a judge, not on a murder. Maybe you ran a red light or something like that.
Right.
but I don't think, you commit a double murder because you're cracked out on cocaine. I don't think the judge is going to say, well, now you're sorry about it. He's going to probably think you're sorry because you're going to die and you want me to do something about that, but don't do the crime if you can't do the time.
What about to the general public? Like as Christians are considering this particular story, should it matter if he's repentant?
Yes.
In terms of how he would feel about the fact that he wasn't offered clemency.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's nice but not sorry, it'd be harder to go like, please spare his life.
Right. If he were saying, well, they deserved it. My cousin and her husband deserved to be shot in their bed while they were asleep.
Yeah, I didn't mean it.
Then yeah, it'd be harder to be sorry, to feel sad for him. But I keep thinking of this model prisoner is actually doing good for the prison system.
That's right.
Because he's a model.
He's a model citizen in there.
Yeah.
He's in the honor area. I mean, he's showing other inmates that you can behave well.
Yeah. And
It's a
it
great
works,
model in the prison.
works for you.
Now, but was he sorry? Well, he made a final public statement.
Okay.
What we'll do is take a quick break, and we come back. I'll share with you quotes from that final statement, and then we'll try to analyze together how we as Christians ought to think through cases like this, where the core question becomes, I mean, yeah, there's some legal issues, but has he been rehabilitated? And if he has, should that matter in these situations? Really interesting case, I think, for Christians to consider, as my heart has been softened to the issue of incarceration in recent years. Story out of Missouri. Inmate Brian Dorsey was executed on Tuesday evening. And just hours earlier, he heard from the Supreme Court, they denied any sort of stay of execution. The governor of Missouri denied his plea for clemency, in spite of the fact that 70 employees in the prison where he was incarcerated in Missouri and a former warden wrote letters saying he's rehabilitated and just pleaded with them to not execute him, allow him to live out his days in prison, not let him out of the prison.
Right.
Allow him to live in prison. Now, his crime was horrific. He was a drug addict. He was in a psychotic state of sorts, hadn't slept for 72 hours on a cocaine bender, murdered his cousin and the cousin's spouse, leaving a 4-year-old. It's tragic.
And the shame of it is they were showing him grace and love by saying, okay, you're hiding out from drug dealers trying to kill you because you've racked up such a big bill.
Mm-hmm.
Come hide at our house and we'll take care of you.
Right.
And that's how he repaid him.
It's egregious.
Yeah.
It's despicable. And yet, at the same time, his lawyers had said that he's received very subpar representation. And it seems like that's the case in some respects.
Yeah.
So he had a final statement. I mean, because I think the last layer of question on this, at least in what we can cover on the show, is was he sorry? Was he repentant? Might have been nice.
Yeah. And this is at the end before his execution, not
Correct.
During his trial.
Correct.
Okay.
So hours before he was executed, his attorneys released a handwritten statement in which he said he was, quote, truly, deeply, overwhelmingly sorry. He went on to say, words cannot hold the just weight of my guilt and shame. To the victims' families, he said, I still love you. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I'm sorry I hurt them and you. Then he addressed his family, friends, and supporters. He said, I'm grateful for you. I have peace in my heart, in large part because of you. To all sides of this sentence, I carry no ill will or anger, only acceptance and understanding. What do you make of that?
It's really powerful, and I'm glad he did that. But part of me is like, I'm wondering if there's any indication that he was sorry or another formal written statement before it was like his execution day. Because, you know, like Ron said, it's really easy to be sorry for a lot of things when you're facing death in a couple hours. I'm not saying he's not sorry, but I think it maybe would have carried more weight had he issued it earlier.
Yeah, and I don't have information as to whether or not he has. I don't know. So what do we make of this? Like, because here's the deal. I don't know that there's a mechanism for anyone to say, this prisoner's been rehabilitated. We need to adjust sentencing in some way.
Right.
Because isn't that, maybe it's not the goal. Isn't that our hope as a society, that when someone is released from prison, that they're a changed person that will no longer commit crime?
Depends on who you're talking to.
Okay.
What do you mean?
Some people would say, no, lock him up and throw away the key. We don't care what happens to him after that. And others would, I think, advocate for what you're referring to, which is more of a rehabilitation-based model, and what Scott advocates for, where they could hopefully one day be reintroduced to society.
Do you think there's a Christian argument for the lock him up and throw away the key? Who cares what it's like in there?
I don't think so, because I think it's Tim Keller said, if not for the grace of God, there go I. I think our goal should always be to try to turn people to Jesus. And I don't have really strong opinions one way or the other on the death penalty, but the thing I always come back to is, if we're killing someone, we're potentially depriving them of the opportunity to meet Jesus if they haven't yet. Right.
Yeah. I'm open to receiving a solid argument on it, but I'm with you. I can't imagine a scenario where someone who loves Jesus and has received the mercy that they didn't deserve from the Lord Jesus for the sins they committed and are going to heaven in spite of what they've done, that while they were yet a sinner, Christ died for them. I don't know how one could hold that position of, who cares? Keep them in there. It doesn't matter. Like, we're supposed to walk in tension of justice and mercy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't fall face first into mercy and be like, let everyone out. Well, no. I mean, there's consequences for crimes. No
Right.
question. Romans 13 makes that very clear. And yet I don't think you can fall heavily on the face biblically either of just all justice. And then I have a hard time, even when you look at, like, Jesus was all about mercy. He was all about it.
Yes, he so often could have issued justice and judgment on a lot of people. Instead, he wanted them to think and to come to a better understanding. The Pharisees and Sadducees, they were trying to trap him all the time with little tidbits of the law, and he wanted them to think beyond that. Look at what the law is pointing to. It's pointing to me. Here I am. I've been pointed at from the entire of Scripture, and here I am right in front of you, and you don't see me.
And I am going to go and take the punishment you deserve. I'm taking the death penalty you deserve. Now, of course, he also said in Luke 6, be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said in Matthew 5, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. To the people who got mad at Jesus for hanging out with tax collectors and sinners at Matthew's house, he said, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. Lamentations 3 says, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Psalm 23, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Like the core aspect of the gospel is mercy, right? And so I look at this, call me crazy. I look at this story and I say, why in the world do we not have a mechanism in our society to be able to take a guy on death row who everyone in the prison that's not incarcerated, 70 people say is rehabilitated, and release, not him, the death penalty.
Right.
And say, okay, yeah, but where's the mechanism for this?
I don't know. That may be why the Supreme Court and even the governor didn't reverse or make a change. They may not have felt like it was within their scope of authority. And I know the Supreme Court's pretty particular about not wanting to be, creating legislation. They just act on what's there.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think we need to keep that in mind, depending on which side you fall on this issue, before we start blaming the governor or the Supreme Court.
I totally agree with that. In fact, I'm not necessarily casting judgment on them, because I have a hard time with the governor, because those who are executives in government authority in the executive branch, they really don't have any guardrails on offering pardons and clemency. They can do what they want. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, there could be extenuating circumstances. And you're right too, Ron, where if there was a legal mechanism where someone's rehabilitated and that would enable them to have a reduced sentence, if that was something that was in the law, the Supreme Court probably would have taken the case and let him go. Not let him go, but let him not be executed.
Right.
I don't know. It kind of breaks my heart that there's no mechanism for what to do with someone who's rehabilitated. Like, how long? And what, I mean, I don't know. Talk me off a ledge, Daria. Tell me when I'm wrong here.
Not sure I can.
Ron?
I'm with you. I think there should be a mechanism for that.
Especially with death penalty.
Right. Because we're not saying let him go. I get frustrated by some of that where, a prisoner will be let go and I'm not sure he's rehabilitated and ready to be in society. But in this case, all you're saying is don't kill him. Let him continue to be an upright citizen within the walls of his correctional facility and, a model to the other incarcerated folks there to see what can happen if you obey the rules. Good things can happen to you even within the walls.
Yeah, and my heart even goes further. And forgive me for leaning. I'm not falling face first on mercy, but my bias is leaning towards mercy because I've received so much of it from the Lord. It's hard for me to not do it.
Mm-hmm.
I even wonder about those who are given very long sentences. Like, let's just say you're given a life sentence and you're totally rehabilitated, unquestionably. How many years is enough? What if they've been in for 20? Is that enough for you? Is that 30? I wish we had a mechanism where mercy could be enacted in some sort of just way. What is it? I'm not in charge of all that. But maybe I'm crazy. And you could talk about that on Friday.
Yeah, you're not going to be here. Thanks for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll just set that on the table and leave.
Topic 1 for Follow-Up Friday. Is Brian crazy?
440-546-2255. If you want more information, there's articles all over the place about the execution of Brian Dorsey. I pray he knew the Lord. His final statement has hints at it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I hope he knew the Lord.